So how many of you guys are fans of Gallagher Fragrances? So I have several of his fragrances, and I thought, why don't I put together a top 5 video of my favorite fragrances from Gallagher Fragrances. And since you might not know about the brand, or you might, this would be a great reference video to come back to and see what I think about the fragrances, because these 5 I really love from his house or his brand, but the top 3 are my favorite fragrances. And you'll see a trend as soon as I get to number 3 and then moving forward to number 1 of the style I like. So if you're curious to learn about my top 5 Gallagher fragrances, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian with Smelling Great Fragrance Reviews. Yesterday we did a video on Sarah Baker's S. Baker collection fragrances, and today another indie house. It's Gallagher Fragrances, and these are my top 5 fragrances from Gallagher Fragrances. Before I get to the ranking of the fragrances, if this is your first time tuning into my channel and you still haven't subscribed to the channel, please click the subscribe button below and also click the bell so that you'll be notified for future videos and giveaways. So how many of you are fans of Gallagher Fragrances? How many of you are fans of indie fragrances? Now, those of you that might not know what indie fragrances are fragrance houses that are independently owned, no backing, no conglomerate, nothing like that behind them. So these fragrances are all done by the man behind the brand, pretty much, Daniel Gallagher, and whatever help he has. So there's a lot of indie perfumery going on here in San Francisco, Bay Area, Northern California, or California in general, but Daniel's fragrances are not from California. But I really do enjoy a lot of the fragrances, and as I said, my top 3 are my favorites, and you're going to see a trend of what I like. And if you have been following my channel and you've seen some of the fragrances pop up on lists, you'll know what the trend is going to be. But we're going to start off right off the bat at number 5. It's Fineapple. So Fineapple is a fine apple, but it's not about green apple, because green apple is one of the notes here. It's also pineapple, so it's a really nice play on words. Fineapple, pineapple, green apple. Both of those notes are in here. So it's pineapple, green apple, there's magnolia. It's a beautiful, beautiful, slightly lemony white flower, big flower, perfectly scented in humid days. It's muskiness from Ambrette, some light jasmine note, and woods, and that's what the fragrance is all about. So it is tart. It's a tart, juicy, crisp, and not so crisp pineapple. When I'm wearing the fragrance, it's a contrast of a smooth, soft pineapple that's mature and very, very flavorful as far as the smell goes, and then the crispiness from the green apple. So in the end, there's a little contrast with the two fruits, but it's a mashing of those fruits, and it makes a great smell. So I'm a fan of pineapple in fragrances, and this one definitely has it prominently featured along with the green apple. And then the muskiness is really, really great from the Ambrette seeds in here. It's pretty prominent, and so it does have this really sexy musk along with it, but for me it's not so strong. It's a little more minuscule amounts of it in there, so the pineapple and the green apple are pretty much taken over. There's that prominent magnolia note in there as well, light woods, and a little bit of flowers from jasmine. So in the end, for me, it reminds me of fruity fragrances like Aventus, but then it doesn't, because it doesn't smell like it. You can smell a little bit of the fruitiness of the pineapple, but if you don't like the fruitiness of the pineapple in Aventus, you like the woodsiness, then this is not for you, because this is all fruits. It's more fruits than woods in comparison to Aventus. And I don't want to use that as a comparison, but I think the inspiration's kind of there from wearing and experiencing this fragrance. In the end, I find it to be very unisex, whereas Aventus leans masculine, or is a masculine targeted fragrance. It's also on the playful side. I mean, the fruits are very, very happy and uplifting. So in the end, it's not like a serious fragrance. It's just a very, very happy, uplifting, playful, fun fragrance with lots of fruits of pineapple and green apple. So those are my thoughts on my number 5 favorite fragrance from Gallagher Fragrances. It's Fineapple. I'll have a link to his website in the info box. You can go check out his fragrances. But my number 2 favorite is Evergreen Dream. So this is a fougere barbershop fragrance that goes in a different style. For me, this is a very, very prominent pine note. So if you've ever hung out in a pine forest and smelled the woods and the trees and all that, you can kind of get the inspiration of this fragrance. So basically just imagine maybe going shaving in the woods in the pine forest, but not necessarily exactly that, but I kind of like to visualize what I'm smelling, and that's kind of what I get with this one. It's pine, lots of pine with lots of lavender. It's aromatic, it's herbal. There's a green bitter galbanum note thrown in here as well, which typically is not something I would find in a fragrance like a barbershop fougere fragrance. Once in a while it appears. But then again, now we go back to Oakmoss. There's some Oakmoss in here as well, which is traditionally found in the base notes of fougere fragrances. So in the end, it's a different kind of a barbershop fougere fragrance, and I like this one because, you know, it's woodsy, it's green, it's herbaceous, it's bitter, but really, really green and woody. There's also cedar, lime note, and birch wood in here as well. And in the end, if you like the smell of a forest, a pine forest with, you know, aromatic herbs and bitter greens growing around, I think you're going to like Evergreen Dream. Now let me know how many of you are familiar with Gallagher fragrances and how many of you are familiar with the first two fragrances I've discussed. At number 5, Fineapple. At number 4, Evergreen Dream. Put a comment down so I can find out. Okay, at number 3, and this is where the trend starts, it is Behold Patchouli. So Behold Patchouli is the latest fragrance from Gallagher Fragrances, or Daniel Gallagher, and I'm a big fan of patchouli, but this one is not the typical kind of patchouli I'm used to. That's why it's at number 3, or else it would have ended up at number 1. But it is in the style of the other the other 2 fragrances that are coming up, and I should say it's in the style as in the style of notes that are used in the fragrances. So kind of get a clue. With this one, it's Behold Patchouli. Even though it's called Behold Patchouli, I feel like there's more chocolate in this fragrance than patchouli, and in the end it's about chocolate, not patchouli. But then again, also the patchouli and the chocolate are kind of neck and neck. They're fighting one another. For me, there was a trend early 90s of doing mochas, you know, espresso, chocolate milk, and also orange, like an orange syrup. For me, that's what this acts like. In the end, patchouli for me is already with chocolatey nuances. It has chocolatey nuances. I always say it when I wear fragrances like Psychedelic or Reminiscence Patchouli. They have a chocolate cakey vibe or touch to them. I think it's a great idea to combine it with chocolate because it brings out the chocolatey nuances, but then also Daniel Gallagher has added lots of orangey touches here. So in the end, it's acting like that, you know, that popular mocha style of drink I used to have back in the early 90s with orange flavoring in there, like an orange syrup. So I don't know what that's called. There's a name for it, but it's just a combination of chocolate and oranges with coffee. But that's what I'm getting with this one. It's not so much about the patchouli, and in the end I wanted it to be about the patchouli, but what I got was a gourmandy patchouli with the citrus notes. But this one has lots of chocolate, patchouli, blood orange, bitter orange, amber. It is ambery. Definitely it is ambery. There's musk, there's tonka beans. Tonka beans come in, and I think there's going to be a kind of a something I'll mention at the end of the video when we get to number 1. It might be kind of like an offspring or inspiration of the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about. There's also orange, clementine, cream soda, benzoin, neroli, olibanum, labdanum, and sandalwood. It does have a creamy sandalwood in the base notes. I don't get much olibanum as a note, because olibanum can go smoky. It's lightly smoky, but not quite. But in the end, it's a great scent. It's gourmand for me. Definitely full-on gourmand rather than gourmand light when you actually use just patchouli that kind of has that chocolate cakey vibe. Let me know if you guys have sampled this one. This is his latest release, as I said, Behold Patchouli, and that's at number 3. Number 2 is Rosé All Day. for the longest time, Rosé All Day was my favorite fragrance because I love gourmands, and this is the trend that you're going to discover that I'm really appreciating in this line of fragrances. Behold Patchouli is gourmand. Rosé All Day is also gourmand, and my number one favorite, I'll tell you about it in a bit. Rosé All Day for me is an appley, rosy gourmand. So when I smell this fragrance, it hints at fragrances like Montal's Intense Cafe. It doesn't actually act like the milkiness of it, but the rose in here reminds me of the rose in Montal Intense Cafe, or even like Mancera's Roses Vanille. But this one's all about apple crisp, honey. It has a very, very prominent honey note, brown sugar, patchouli, plum note. There's metallic notes, there's rose, there's vanilla, labdanum, tonka beans, and sandalwood. It's really, really delicious, and I love that original apple crisp note. One of my favorite things to have, apple crisp or apple pie with vanilla on top, yum, yum, yum. And you really get an authentic smell in this one of the apple crisp. Really, literally stands out, and you can smell it. And it makes me crave apple crisps, but I always like it with vanilla on top. And this is really, really delicious fragrance. Those of you that love gourmands, and you know that I love gourmands and you've been following me, I highly recommend my top 3 fragrances here for gourmands, and especially number 2 and number 1 as full-on gourmands from Gallagher Fragrances. So Rosé All Day is my number 2 favorite from Gallagher Fragrances. And my number 1 favorite, again, this is the trend you'll see, it's Wicked Good. So I thought that this might kind of be, Behold Patchouli might be a bit of an offspring from here, but not necessarily, because this one is chock full of different notes. But here you have chocolate and tonka beans, which are also in here, but I can see that you can kind of add additional notes and make a new unique fragrance, of course. But what's the deal with Wicked Good? It is a really, 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 really yummy chocolate, tonka beans, and Madagascar vanilla is the notes, or just vanilla. It's syrupy, it's gooey, it's you know, when you're melting chocolate, you can kind of experience that creaminess. It's a little bit nutty with slight tobacco-ish nuances from the tonka, but it's a good, good gourmand. I thought I would say that it might kind of border something like Fève Delicious, and even though it might kind of, not pretend, but it might kind of try to go to that direction, but it goes in a completely different direction. For me, this is more chocolate than tonka, whereas Fève Delicious is tonka and chocolate cacao dustings more than like real chocolate, whereas this one is really, really creamy chocolate rather than cacao, which is a dusty, because in Fève Delicious I get a dusting of cacao, not smooth and melted chocolate, which is what I get with this one. In the end, it turns out to be a different fragrance. But all 3 notes are really, really wonderful together. There is a slight, really, really slight booziness under there. It's almost like a, you know, boozy vanilla kind of thing happening in there. But for me, what's really running the show is the chocolate, the syrupy chocolate, melted chocolate with the tonka beans. It's absolutely delicious. Really, really delicious, and that's why Wicked Good is my favorite fragrance from the House of Gallagher Fragrances. So as I said, that's the trend, gourmand fragrances. I love those kind of fragrances, and now that we're in fall, the 3 fragrances at the top 3 are really, really great. This one is very, very citrusy with lots of patchouli and even lots of chocolate. And this one, the apple crisp thing, is so good. You can totally smell the apple crisp. You can also totally smell the rose in the back there, trying to act like it's that kind of a rose from Intense Cafe, but also loads of honey in this. And then this really wonderful fragrance, and that's Wicked Good. Anyway, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on these fragrances from Gallagher Fragrances. Are you a fan of this house? Which fragrances do you own? Let me know. Put some comments down. And how would you rank these 5 fragrances if you did the ranking? Put a comment down and let me know how you would rank them. I'd like to find out. Anyway, guys, if you have any questions or comments, please list below. Otherwise, please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.